welcome to your daily Gameface. I am Dr. Kim Lannon. After being away on a little hiatus last week, impromptu mental health day off. Well, I didn't take the day off. I just took the day off from you. Yes, from all men.
It's okay. Get it?
Oh, good Lord. No, it was literally, I texted you and I'm like, it was the most, I would call it people would say the schizophrenic text. I'm going to be late. Then it was, yep. I'm going to do it from home. And then I'm not coming in home.
Yep.
And you're like, okay. Yeah, so I'm just taking a mental health day. I went to work though, but it was too much last week. I had a lot of stuff.
Yeah, see, anything after an hour before the show is irrelevant because I'm in the car. It's all the same.
I was laughing though because it was like ping ponging. Yep. I was like, I'm there, I'm not, I'm coming, I'm doing it from home, I'm not. You're just like, okay.
Whatever
you say.
Enjoy your day.
Oh my God. Anyway, so I'm back, and I'm back after the fact that I don't know if you've been following on social media, which I think you probably have.
Yes.
Like I was loading up the week, getting ready for probably at least a 2-part series, maybe even 3. It will depend on how it goes, right, in terms of people's comments. But people are very excited about the fact that this is a series on narcissism. I think I probably could do an entire whole podcast forever on narcissism because they are out there, but I choose not to do that because I think it would probably exhaust me because being around narcissism is exhausting, but we'll talk about that. But so I've been promoting on most of my social media feeds that for, this show coming up on narcissism and understanding it and all those things. And people have, it's interesting because people have a wide variety of understanding of what narcissism is. And I have a love-hate relationship with it because I did my dissertation was partially on narcissism in a way because it was on shame in Olympic level athletes.
Okay.
And so the underside of narcissism is shame. So I have a very long-standing relationship with this concept and word for many years of my many years on this earth. And so I have a fascination with it. I'm very accustomed to working with people with it. And you can't not have it in your life because there are people everywhere with this. But when I'm talking about, I'm going to talk.
Well, everyone's on this, if you want to use the term, on the spectrum.
Everyone's on the spectrum,
right?
Well, yes, everyone has it to some degree. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But like any term in psychology or in pop psychology, it gets overused and then it gets used in the wrong way. And then people use it for describing things and not really understanding what it means. And
listen to people, everybody's a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's not
Well, it's
untrue.
not true, but
exactly.
it's just a matter of degree, and it's also a matter of how you're interpreting, and then also what spin you're putting on it, and then.
But there is a clinical form.
There is clinical form, and then there is also kind of just your colloquial terminology of every day that you might not meet the clinical standards for, but you might be on that continuum. So we'll take it into that continuum, right? So, but first off, when I teach about this in my class, and so people that are listeners will have heard me talk about this story. So narcissism is a Greek mythological story. Sometimes people will say it's Roman, but my understanding of it and my years of doing research and so on, it's Greek. Mm-hmm. And it comes from Narcissus, right? So the Narcissus myth basically explains how the origins of the narcissus flower. Now, do you know what the narcissus flower is?
Oh.
So it's essentially a daffodil. So if you see the different versions of daffodils, so the traditional narcissus is the long, tall, paperwhite. They call them paperwhites, and they're those long, very, very tall. You see them in the springtime. A lot of times people put them in pots at Easter, and like grow them from the bulb. Mm-hmm. And they're beautiful, and they stand alone. Typically, they don't. You can plant multiple bulbs, but you don't get like this bushel of flowers out of them, right? It's a standalone flower. But the term narcissus comes from the story of the narcissus flower. Now, when I say narcissus, I'm not putting the T on it. It's actually just the narcissus flower. So it's your basic form of daffodil, but it's the standalone Paperwhite that actually can be very pungent, and people often don't like the smell of it because it has a strong odor to it sometimes. Your traditional bigger daffodils don't, but that one does. So here's your little horticultural moment
All
of the
right.
day. All right. So through the story of Narcissus, it's the story of Echo. Not my cat Echo, spelled differently as well, but the echo, like as in your hearing, right? That you'd hear in your ear. But the story of Echo and Narcissus, and so the Narcissus was supposed to be this man who lived a lifelong, sort of difficult life, and one would say, of not being able to see his own face. And so he would live a long life as long as he didn't see his own face. So you have to follow along in the story to understand, like, there's going to be, it's more of like the metaphor of it, right? So Narcissus grew up to be exceptionally handsome and charming and beautiful looking. And but he had a disdain for love, and was rejecting of all of his admirers, and including the little nymph, what they called her in the mythology, Echo. And so Echo's curse, which has become to known, is because of her love for Narcissus. Echo was cursed by a goddess, Nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, wow.
Nemesis, right? Your
Yeah.
nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
To only be able to repeat the last words spoken to her. So she was very heartbroken by Narcissus' rejection, that eventually she faded away until only her voice remained. So start thinking psychologically about all the implications about what this means underneath, right? So the curse of Narcissus is that as revenge, a goddess, Nemesis, right, cursed him to fall deeply in love with his own self and his reflection in a stream, and that a love that could never be fulfilled within his own self, because he was always looking at his own self in reflection. So see this falling out? You see how this works,
Yep.
right? And so it came to a tragic end with the two of them, because Narcissus stayed by the water's edge, always pining for the image that he saw that would never respond to him. And he became lonely. He became essentially all on his own because he had rejected Echo, right? So he eventually wasted away from his unrequited love, and he died. And so the Narcissus flower, coming full circle, in the same spot where he died, the Narcissus flower bloomed, forever turning its head toward water as if to admire its reflection, which it does.
Wow.
So that's like the story of Narcissus. Now, if you look at the whole story of just that alone, you sort of see the underpinnings of where we start to understand what narcissism is, right? So that these two people, these two god and goddesses or whatever, Narcissus and Echo, one loved himself, the other had a supply chain of love for him.
Yep.
He rejected it because he was so involved with himself and became so isolated and alone. He died alone. And hence she lost her voice because he didn't have any space for her. And he used tactics, essentially, as we'll talk about, to get rid of her, to get her to quiet down, to get her to stop talking.
Yep.
And then what did he do? He shot himself in his own foot, right? He dies alone. And then what sprouts? A single flower every spring to come up to look for its love, but never can find it because it always keeps turning its head to the water.
Do you believe the mythology this is a chicken and the egg thing? Is the mythology describing the condition, or is the condition
describing that? Well,
were they writing about narcissism?
Well, when they did the mythology, when that was, they weren't writing about any pathology. They weren't writing. It was just the story.
Just a story.
It was just the story. But the Greek myth itself, when they wrote about it, was basically the whole process of it was the cautionary tale of vanity, the cautionary tale of self-absorption. So whether or not they, I mean, that wasn't a clinical time when they were writing about these myths, right? But it tells of it tells of all the psychological factors of rejection, abandonment, attachment, and unable to embrace one's own reflection, as able to look at it and do self-reflection to then turn away from, to see what the reality is. So he wasted away, not ever really reaching his maximum potential or getting the love that he could have, that he could have gotten. So, the key lessons in that, before we really talk down the line here about like narcissism in real time, is, so let's talk about that a little bit. So the dangers of vanity, right? So in everyday life. So the myth, if we talk about the myth, is that cautionary tale about being overly preoccupied with your appearance and needs to exclude everyone else. But in depth of like something contemporary, it really wouldn't be about just the way you look. It would be about your whole self-image. So it's that overall who you are in the world, and how that vanity, and people think of vanity as only the way you look, like visually on your face or your body.
Right.
The vanity is also internal to, do you have a good soul? Do you have empathy? Do you have compassion? So people, when they hear vanity, often go right to the look, but it's about the vanity of keeping up one's image, of how one purports themselves in the world, or comports themselves in the world around them, and how they're seen and how they want to be seen. And without really looking at the fact that, we can say that narcissists, when you see a narcissist, they typically think they can't be seen through. They typically think that all their behavior and all the way they dress, all the way they look, all the way they act, no matter what, is not transparent. But narcissists are actually the easiest, most transparent people to read through, typically.
Yeah.
Not at the beginning of a relationship, because we'll talk about that. But if you saw some of my memes this week and stuff, they're very charming, because they look beautiful, they sound beautiful, they have all the right words, they have all the right looks, they know what to do.
They're skilled. Yeah.
They're very skilled at what they do, because the involvement of self is there. And the involvement in self, and I'm going to go back to this when we get into the psychology of it, but the involvement of self comes from completely wounded, I hate to say it like this, but it's true, mommy and daddy wounds. It's just mommy and daddy wounds across the board, that like they're just so wounded and unloved in the way that they needed to be loved, in the way that they should have been loved and taken care of as a child. That narcissism comes from that. And people will go, I see people occasionally that have narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder, and they will often speak of their mothers and fathers, but mothers in particular, about how wonderful they were. And in fact, when you really pull out all of it, yeah, they were not. They weren't.
We're already at the first misunderstanding about it, because invoking the word vanity means you think people are obsessed with themselves,
Right.
that they have a really high opinion of themselves,
And they don't.
It's just the opposite.
And it's absolutely the opposite of what one thinks colloquially, and that's one of the biggest misnomers. So one of the biggest mythologies about narcissism and vanity is that people just think they're so wonderfully full of themselves. They just think they're so great. No, they actually pretty much don't like themselves, often hate themselves,
and they're hiding themselves,
and are miserable.
Yeah.
So they're hiding behind the pool of water, because they see what they want to see, which is they keep looking into the water, thinking that I see what I see, and therefore everybody else must see that too, when in fact that is not how it is, right? So that's the danger of vanity. And so what they do is, they get preoccupied with all of that, and they exclude out what everyone else sees, therefore protecting themselves in defense, right? Okay, so another lesson from this is the consequence of rejecting love. I mean, so by rejecting the love of others and turning all affection inward, the love of self, which really isn't, again, this is the thing, it's the antithesis of what you would think. Narcissists don't love themselves.
Right.
They actually have a love-hate relationship with themselves. They love to hate themselves. Literally, they are not happy with themselves. They're miserable. They are hurt people that how the phrase is, hurt people will hurt people.
Yes.
They are those people. They are hurt people that will hurt people, but not in the beginning, but eventually that's what they do. They're so unhappy. They're so rejecting of any kind of love towards them, because of the mom and dad wounds that they had from childhood, that they just reject it and turn on you. So people say, my husband, and I'm going to focus a lot today on men, because 75% of the people who have narcissism are men. So, and are much more overt with their narcissism, whereas women tend to be much more covert and passive aggressive. You don't see it quite as often, but in men, they just happen to be more predominant, because they happen to be the ones that get the mommy and daddy wounds, particularly the mommy wounds, right?
Yep.
So that by rejecting the love of others and turning all affection inward, a narcissist will bring about their own downfall. They will perpetually be like a quintessential bachelor. They will perpetually be a person who loses relationships, or you will commonly find a narcissistic person telling you, when, especially when you first meet them, about every single person in their life before that. If you're in their life as a partner, this is a red flag, by the way.
Yep.
I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is a red flag. If someone's telling you that ex was terrible, that ex did this, that ex was that, they all did these things to me, that's a red flag that you have a narcissist in front of you, because that's impossible. And so, you know, back in my day, I have certainly been, and we all have been, duped by those things. But knowing now what I know now, it's like, oh, what a red flag. It's such an easy red flag to have, because it's that, oh, she was awful, she was crazy. It's if someone's constantly saying that person did this and that person did that, and it's never the person standing in front of you, you have the biggest red flag. There's so many, but that's a big one. Okay, so we'll come back to that, because so the consequence of rejecting the love is that the person's going to end up alone, because eventually they're going to get someone that's going to be so savvy that they're going to be so rejected, and or they're going to get old enough that they have nobody else to get to, right?
Stop cultivating supply.
Right, so because there will be no supply left, right? So the need for balance, all right? The story of Narcissus and Echo illustrates that there's such a tragedy between the selfishness, the selflessness that comes from Echo, through the character of how she wants to have his love and attention and affection, and will do anything for him to get that. And she wastes away being rejected. So they both end up being wasted away because they don't take care, neither of them end up taking care of the actual issue going on. Obviously it's a mythology. So Echo ends up getting paralyzed in her rejection and wastes away. But what it does is it suggests that what we would learn from it is that a healthy life requires balance between having your own self-compassion, knowing when to know your red flags and all the things, and then also compassion for others. And that includes like walking away. So that's going to be part of what we talk about. Another piece to this story is emotional immaturity because of the mom and dad wounds. And I do want to point out that typically I'm not ever saying, how I often will say, there's no blaming moms or dads in these things.
Yeah.
This is really truly comes down to, it's a character and moral development issue. This is not that becomes a psychological issue, but this is actually nurtured and built into a child to become this way because they are neglected, because they are abandoned.
So this isn't normal or inherent childhood trauma.
I mean,
some of which is inherent in just growing up.
Right. I mean, it's childhood trauma for sure, but it's not in the same way we'd think of in other disorders, right? Or other disordered behavior, because it's not always going to be a full-blown disorder, right? So there's an emotional immaturity to narcissists. And in talking about the mythology, Narcissus' inability to love anyone but himself is really a representation of that emotional immaturity and being stuck sort of in an unhealthy fixation of self. Because when you don't get a supply from your parent, when you don't get the supply from your mom, you don't get the supply from your dad, what do? You go inward. You go into self-soothe. This is why there's such a huge underlying run of pathology and addiction with people who have addiction that have their narcissism underneath, because narcissism is shame. And I'm ashamed that I couldn't get loved enough. I'm not worthwhile enough. So what do? I self-love. And how do I do it? I drink, I drug, I gamble, I have sex. I find love in all the wrong places because I couldn't get it from anything else. So in the story of Narcissus, obviously in mythology, that wasn't there, but that's what it really means. It means that there's that emotional immaturity that says, if you didn't give me the love, I have to give the love myself. But the love is poor, because if your model is poor, then you're going to poorly love yourself.
Yeah, you create that character that can draw that love.
Right. And if you don't love yourself, as cliche as it always sounds, if you literally don't love yourself in a true sense of the word, not the narcissist sense, you are never going to be able to reciprocate and give out that love to anybody else, because you're going to build a trauma bond. So if you jump back a couple weeks, you'll go back to my trauma bond shows and you'll understand, how does a trauma bond get built like that. So, and the difference between self-love and narcissism, it provides a very clear distinction between healthy self-love and destructive, obsessive narcissism that ultimately leads to withering off and dying off, right? So you're either in healthy self-love or in your destruction. And true narcissists are destroyers. They destroy themselves while they destroy others around them. There's always a wake. There's always collateral. There's always something going on. And when they, and it's like it's almost like they're a heat-seeking missile. They seek to destroy, right?
Yep.
Right? Sip of water. So I think that those are like the important pieces to understand in like the traditional sense of the story, because I mean that sets you up for the whole piece of what narcissism is. So when we actually talk about narcissism, let's talk about it from now the contemporary understanding of so narcissists are on a continuum. Everybody has features of narcissism because we all have moments in our lives where we've been damaged. The damage occurs when things are either said to us, not said to us, implied to us, overt or covertly, or we are neglected, abandoned, or not attached to in a way that we deserve. So there's a great book out there that I have my class read every semester, that I teach for interpersonal dynamics, for understanding addiction. It's called "Will I Ever Be Good Enough?" A daughter's guide to living with a narcissistic mother. They also have, the same author also has one for sons of narcissistic mothers and fathers, but it's "Will I Ever Be Good Enough?" And I think the title is so prolifically accurate because at the base of a narcissist, it's they're never good enough. So when like jump forward now, so you're in a relationship with someone and you hear someone be like, "I'm just never good enough." They go right into victim mode. "I'm never good enough. Nothing's ever good enough. There'll never be anything that I could say that would be right enough," which excuse me for my cough, which may or may not be true. 99.9% of the time, it's not true. It's not what the partner or the other person is thinking or feeling. But the narcissist perceives and interprets without any supply, that immediately, no matter what is said, no matter what is being asked of, no matter what, it's immediately interpreted as a criticism. It's immediately that they are not good enough. You could tell them, "Could you pick up the sponge off the sink?" And immediately it's a crush to their ego. Yeah. That's how quickly it's interpreted. And then it backfires and turns on you, right? Because you're automatically like, "Nothing's ever good enough. I can never do anything right enough. It goes right into victim mentality because the person has been so damaged that everything is a thing. So going back, when the making of a narcissist is so early on, we're talking like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and then not giving that child supply of love, not giving that child supply of authentic, genuine feedback. Growing up in alcoholic homes or growing up in addiction homes, with parents that have addiction, sets up kids for narcissism because they're set up to get hurt emotionally. It's emotional hurts. This is not the same as getting physically. How people say often physical abuse is way better than getting emotionally abused. This is a case where the emotional abuse is so bad that this is the damage it does, because it's so insidious and so it becomes malignant. It's a cancer when you have full-blown narcissistic people. So the child will have their supply from their parent is so poor. When I've talked before in shows about being tethered, there's no real tethering. The tethering's there. It's manipulative. obviously.
Mhm.
It's just in a different way. So when I've talked before in shows about a narcissistic mother or a father pulling for the supply from their kid,
Right.
that's absolutely there. But when they're creating a narcissist, it's the restriction, it's the elimination, that's how they get, because then the kid will keep coming back to try to get love, try to get more from them, and because they keep getting rejected, like Echo,
Yeah.
right, then what happens, they build this wall around them, and then they go into like a pretend space in their head about how life is and how to get their love met and how to get their needs met, and they have to find adaptable ways, which is why if you go back to my social media last week, I had like a grid about, right out of the gate, that it's, the person is, at the top of the relationship. It's whether it's friendship or relationship. I'm just going to talk relationally here, but it's charming,
Yeah.
like promises the world, just like they got promised in the beginning, right?
Right.
Then it's the love bombing, and then we start going down the slide, right? Because that's what they do, but that's how they were trained. And people will say to me, can a narcissist get healed? Can a narcissist be any better? I typically say if it's a very minor little bit of narcissism, absolutely, because we all have it, right? If someone, grew up and someone was always telling you that, you're stupid, you're fat, you're ugly, whatever, those are things. I mean, they're all damages to your ego. They all hit the seat of your soul and so on. Those can damage you and make you feel really less than, which makes you, either go inward and become narcissistic to protect yourself, or you go and work on things, or you negate the things in your head because they're not true. Like you figure it out.
Yep.
A narcissist that has accumulated damage of someone being abusive to them, neglectful, rejecting, all the things that narcissist was they are typically people that become relationally a nightmare, and they become neglectors, abandoners, restrictors with no ability, or I shouldn't say no ability. They choose not to have an ability to step in. They're not going to step in. They're not going to change. They're not going to. They can look right at you in the face of audio, video, and pictures, and literally go, "That never happened, and that was never said."
Yep.
Or with witnesses, and they will still believe what they want to believe because they buy into their own self so deeply and their own storyline and narrative so heavily that is where they sit. And you'll see that in various forms across the spectrum, as you called it,
Yeah.
right? Thoughts? You have any thoughts, Lou, so far?
No, this is. We've been doing narcissism for such a long time, and we've all had experience with it, interpersonal experience with it.
Yes. Are you saying we have been doing it, or
Yeah,
in general? Well, yeah, because it always comes up.
It always comes up
because it's always there, right?
Right.
Okay. So to actually have a narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis, right, for like to meet criteria, so you have to have a person in front of you that has an exaggerated sense of self-importance and it sort of expects others to recognize and acknowledge their greatness, so to speak. Now, a narcissist will say right away, "That's not true. I don't need that." So everybody, here's the difference. Everybody, we all want and need praise. And if you say you don't, you might be a narcissist, right? Because that's just not true. We all like pats on the back. Do we need them? No, but if we get them, great. A person that's not a narcissist will get the pat on the back and be like, "Thank you so much," and or be a little embarrassed, which is a little shame, like, "Oh, I'm, it's okay. You don't have to do that." A narcissist is, they'll act as if it's like, "Oh, it's okay. It's no big deal," but they feed off of that, and it fills them up. But they will deny that they actually need that. They will deny that they have to be seen as wonderful and great. They will do these selfless acts of kindness out in the world for other people. But behind closed doors in a relationship, that same person will not be the same way. They will torture the partner. They will not be selfless. They will be selfish. They will seek you to essentially glorify them while denying that they're doing that, and make it very difficult, because the person in the relationship on the other side can never get ahead. There is no win, so to speak.
Right.
There is no stacking wins there, because there's no way. There's no way to win that.
But they select people who are willing to try, like Echo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They lack empathy. Second diagnostic, they lack empathy.
Yep.
Now, here's the difference again. So I'm just going to make the difference once. Narcissists out in the world will not lack empathy, because they have been trained how to look okay on the surface out in the world for short bits of time to others.
That's in front of the curtain.
That's in front of the curtain.
Yeah.
Behind the curtain, always,
Yep.
and rarely do I say always or nevers, but always, they are not empathetic. They will appear initially like they are, because they're looking for you to buy in. They're looking for you to be part of their story. Empathy is not part of them, which is different than a sociopath. Not in the way that it's like a no conscience. Like, they know the difference between right and wrong. They know good and bad. They,
Right.
they're not like murderers. This is just this is an emotional murderer. They will murder you emotionally. They will destroy people emotionally, because they lack remorse. They lack empathy. They lack compassion. But God forbid you don't give it to them.
Yeah, right.
And when you do, it's never enough. It's never the right kind. And they interpret it the way they think that they hear it, see it, or feel it. And it's never consistent with what outsiders would see. So 5 people could be standing there watching someone say something empathetic to a narcissist, and that narcissist would say, "Do you see? I didn't get any empathy." And everyone would say, "Yeah, you did." But they would deny it and fight that to the death. Like, they would say, "No, that's not true." Okay. So the third thing is they have an obsession for admiration. So they will go out of, now, they don't necessarily, again, they will say, "No, I don't." Another sign. The admiration isn't necessarily you saying, something like, "I admire you, you're amazing." It's more about, like, it's like I hear it in my head always is, "Look, mommy, look what I did." And the mom is not paying attention and never does, right? They're always on their phone now or whatever. It's the trying the extra hard mile, going the extra distance to see if anyone will finally recognize when no one ever does. So they're always looking for someone to say, "Wow, that's great," which is why a lot of times you'll hear a narcissist speak over the top about themselves. Like, the storylines that they'll tell are just so grandiose, which is often the very public thing that people will talk about. Colloquially, people will say, "Oh, he or she's a narcissist," because their stories are so, they're one-uppers. They do everything over the top, right? That's such a very basic part of what this is. The admiration really is so much deeper that they're looking for. They're looking for something that the cup is never full. It will never get filled. No one can ever fill this cup, because the admiration that they're looking for doesn't exist.
Well, it's often emotional fishing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
pH fishing. In other words,
Yes.
they're finding the people who react to those stories.
Yes. And
that's how they screen people.
Right. And that it's the hook.
Yeah.
It's that, "Oh my God, did you know that he did that? Oh my God, did you know she did that? Oh my God." It's like, but
the person who rolls their eyes, they're just going to turn away from.
Right.
Yeah.
And the person who rolls their eyes should know that you're sitting in front of a narcissistic person.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can still do that and still get stuck and get pulled in.
Yeah.
Because the charm is still there. So it's like, because all these pieces they're so intricately woven, because narcissists who are really good at it get you. And they can get the best of people, right? So, and that's what happens.
Just to go on a tangent here, we're all doing this while we're hearing these stories about people come up in your mind. People
yes.
that you've
Oh
met.
God, yes.
And you talked about percentage of men to women.
Yes.
What's the percentage for middle child?
I don't know, but I can find out.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's numbers out there for what it is for middle children.
Because a middle child just came to mind for me when thinking about this.
Yeah, I can look it up. I don't know what it is, or if someone's listening and wants to look up what are the narcissistic personality rates for middle children. But I can find out.
Because they suffer through a lot of this, having that need created in them.
Yes.
Middle children.
I mean, middle, that's why it's always the forgotten middle child,
Right.
which they become very self sufficient. I typically, anecdotally, if I just came off the top of my head thinking about it, I always think of middle children as going sort of off on their own and doing their own thing and not returning back to the center, or like the home. Whereas like the baby, if you
So
have
not
three,
developing that need.
not right,
Yeah.
more that, and it's more the baby of the family that becomes the narcissist or the first.
Yeah.
If it's, and often only children will be thought of as narcissistic. Um, but the research doesn't bear that out. That's an old kind of myth where you get, I'm an only, and people are like, oh, you're an only, you must have been spoiled, you must have been like this and that. It's like, no, not all onlys, and not all babies have baby, of 3 or 4 or 10, whatever. But the middle child is often just the forgotten, and that stands still true, is that they're forgotten, because they take everything and then they go, okay, I'm out because I'm already out. I've already been pushed out. So I'm going to go live my life on my own and figure it out. Right. But I'm going to look up the stats on that because I actually don't know. So if anyone's out there listening, you want to find out. Okay. This is a big one in the diagnostic criteria, is that they will maneuver and manipulate people for their own personal gain. They also, so every single time I say this, I'm like, but they'll tell you they're not doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So note to self, they will tell you they're not doing that. Everything. And when I say everything, I say everything. Everything has an agenda. I had someone once tell me years ago that, and they firmly believe this, and they still believe this to this day. He looked right at me and said, nothing comes for free. Everybody has an agenda, no matter what. So and they were talking about a relationship, and I'm like, oh, and I was like, oh, narcissism right there, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, and that person I know still believes that everybody works off an agenda. That's a person who's been damaged and made to believe early on that their worth is based on what you can do for me, or what have you done for me lately,
and then neutralizing that fault by assigning it to everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. So putting it out into the world that, well, everybody has an agenda. No one does anything authentically out of something good and pure.
Not just me. Everybody
things like this, right? Because it's so one-sided. So, so I always find that one, well, these are all always interesting, but I'm going to use the word that they use in the diagnostic manual is, manipulative. Manipulation is a coping strategy. So in psychology, we all manipulate. So because we all manipulate situations, we cope with situations to make us feel better. Some are healthier than others, and when we talk about narcissism, it ends up, manipulation ends up creating a wave of destruction, usually with narcissists, and creates manipulation are the tactics that come with it, the techniques, the gaslighting, the gray, like there's all kinds of areas that are in this that are damaging to people. Restriction of love, restriction of sex, restriction of or expectation of money and financial support, when in fact they don't support themselves, and would deny that they don't, while getting the supply from their partner. Like there's so many different ways of manipulating, but it's one of the key factors. The person, so next one, the person often fantasizes about having great amounts of power or success and brilliance, like that they've had it. You'll often hear this, especially when I treat a lot of people with addiction. They'll talk about what they had, and it's always these very grandiose stories, some that are true and some that aren't, but oftentimes they're so over the top. Like, I used to make $1 million. That may or may not be true. I used to own, a $3 million home and a boat and live on the water in Florida. And I had a villa in Italy, or, big stories. Sometimes they're true, but most of the time they're not. And they're usually these fantasies and narratives that people, when you first meet, you believe because the charm is there. Like, why would anyone lie? Right. Why would anyone make up a story like that? Why would that be a thing? Well, why? Because look at famous narcissists out in the world, all the people that have impersonated Kennedys or that have impersonated Rockefellers, the guy that was like going around. And you remember the guy that
Yep.
had the look, right? I mean, this is what people do because they are so narratively bought into their own story because they're so damaged that they believe that. So I often, when I hear stories from people that I end up deeming narcissistic, it's kind of like when someone says, I had 2 beers, and I'm like, oh, there's 10, versus in a narcissist, when they say when they used to make $1 million. I'm like, yeah, you made 100,000, maybe. Right. So I go the opposite way when because it's usually less than, like, way less, if it's even true.
Right.
And if it's even on the radar at all. So because it's usually such a fantasy, right? But they fantasize about it. It's a daydream about how their career has been. I mean, look at people that say that their
relevance of it,
right?
Their degree of relevance of it is a red flag right there, right? What you used to make.
Yes, right. It's, and what I could make or what I'm going to make or whatever. I mean, when I say used to, it's usually because I'm referring to people that are the people who have been in addiction. Oftentimes will have much and then lose everything.
Yep.
And so therefore their stories are usually credible in that way, but they lose it all because their addiction, which also had narcissism and shame in it, killed them, like financially, emotionally, spiritually. Everything fell apart because that's what happens, right? One of my favorites, but painful, is the arrogance and entitlement. They are arrogant and entitled. They will say, no, they're not. Again, I have to keep saying, they'll say, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
The sense of entitlement and expectation that narcissistic people have is baffling sometimes because because they say that they don't feel that way or they don't think that way, and that they will purport themselves to be loving and giving and kind, which they are, because in front of the curtain, they will give $100 tip to a waitress for a $20 meal. They will go out of their way to make a big, flagrant, wonderful scene in public about something and do something wonderful and all that. Or they'll go and help someone out, but then expect to get, paid for it, but it was doing something for a friend, but they expected something. And then they hold a grudge and resentment against that person because they didn't get their supply. Why? Because that's the damaged child. The damaged child, went to mommy and said, here, mommy, I'm going to help you. And the mommy never gave them the phrase. Mommy never gave them a reward. Mommy never did anything. So now they expect it, even though that there's never been a reinforcement that you're going to get that. Normal, healthy people, if you're asked to help someone move, for instance, like, hey, we're moving next weekend, could you help us move on that day? And you commit to it, you should never expect that you're getting some kind of payment, maybe pizza at the end of the day, or maybe a sandwich or something. But narcissists are entitled. They feel that you owe them because they're so damaged and they feel like they didn't get what they needed. You will often be in a relationship with them where you're paying for the sins of the mom and dad that they didn't give to their child. And now you have an adult child living with you who expects that you should buy them everything or you should give them everything. And they will deny that they feel or think that, but they do expect it. And then they will tell you that they don't expect it. It's a very vicious loop. So I call that looping. That's that chaos loop that comes. And if you're a feeder to that, it's very hard to break out of, because, this week, if you go back to my social media, you'll see all these people going like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh yeah, I've been there. That loop for me, because it's such a common looping pattern. Because
it's often part of the debriefing of the relationship. It's like, I can't believe they did that. They took that from me.
Right. And how much they took from me, because, and it's like, that's one of the, I don't think we'll get to it today, but talking about it, and how to manage narcissism and how to get rid of a narcissist in your life, or at least control them to maintain your sanity, which I use control loosely, not in the way that people might think, but is that looping that goes on where they continue to pull you in and you don't realize it until it's like you're so far in and people are like, oh my God, how do you get out of that? Because the guilt tripping. And then, so I will often say, I say this to myself and I say this to others about it. It's like, don't say, why is this happening to me? Say, what am I going to do about it? And I'm not going to allow this to happen to me. It's not, why is this happening to me? Because that puts you in like a role of like helplessness. It's, I'm not going to allow this to happen to me. And then the work begins. It's like, how do you then stop it from happening? Because it's always there. It's like knocking at the door all the time. Like, you're not paying attention. You're not
But
paying
you have
attention.
to examine your role in it,
Yes.
because your personality makes you vulnerable to that.
Right.
You were selected.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there are so many selectable people out there, because people, I mean, I can't believe I'm going to say this. There's a lot of good people out in the world. And there's a lot of bad people too. So don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of good people out there with good souls that don't expect to be taken. And so, and then by the time that they are so far in, the taking has happened so deeply that the unraveling of it is very difficult. But there are very good strategies for how to do this. It just takes a while. So if you have like a 20, 25-year relationship, or even 5-year, it's not going to just unravel.
But you have to understand the dynamics, which means you have to understand the narcissist, and you have to understand your role and what in your personality brings you to that entrapment.
Well, yes, and usually usually the role of the other person is they're enabling it because they didn't realize initially, right, that they're doing it. And then you have to realize that you become trauma bonded in around whatever was going on. And then the role of the person that's in it is somehow continues to supply. And that's where so when we talk about the arrogance and entitlement, there's also anger. Now, that's not in the diagnostic specifics, but there's an anger that comes with the arrogance and entitlement. Like, if they don't get their way, if they're not happy, if they, their perception is so off. That's the other key here is a narcissist perception is not like, you could have 100 people in the room and 99 of them would be able to agree with you. And then the narcissist would be like, no, they all agree with me. Yeah. Like that. They do not see that. And then they'll challenge it, like as if you have a committee that's against them, and that, if they could self-validate by finding their own committee, they would be validated for life. But they never find one. They don't go seeking one. Why? They don't go seeking out to find a validation from others, because if they did, they'd have to show what their colors are. So do they find people that will buy in? Yeah, but they're the new people. They're the shiny objects that they think they can pull in. But that's why relationships don't last very long, because
they have their flying monkeys,
right?
Who are people who are earlier in the spiraling down of the relationship.
Well, right, they're in the beginning phases of something that's in front of the curtain, that's not behind the curtain. And oftentimes the people don't get behind the curtain, so they don't really see it. They see some of it, but you don't really see all of it. But you're pretty good to bet that when you have a person in front of you that doesn't have a lot of relationships, and this isn't to say for people that have like, 1 or 2 friends. This is about people that they're acquaintances. They're not real friendships. People talk about, 40 years ago, he was a friend of mine. I haven't seen him, but we're still friends. All that. That's a person that's usually a flag for a narcissist, because that's just not friendship. That's a built up storyline in your head that is not real. Right. So that's not. And so the other piece of this, and there's other pieces, but the other piece of this is oftentimes the person is envious of other people. They will be envious of you in the relationship. If you are successful, if you are doing really well, they're the crab in the bucket pulling you back while looking at you saying, no, I'm not doing that. They are envious, sometimes jealous, but envious of what you have, because that's really at their soul what they want. They found you partially because they were edifying you. Somehow they found something in you that they truly wanted themselves, because envy is about, I want what the other person has.
Yes.
And when they don't have it, instead of becoming a partner and jumping in and really getting that with them, what they do is they actually pull from them. They suck it away. They destroy it as much as they can, even though they will say that they are not doing that. That's what they do. They just, by nature, when you have a true narcissist, because they lack so much insight, usually their insight, and they don't want to have insight because that's too painful to look at, because that's too much work also.
Right.
They will just suck the soul out of you so much that you could be destitute, poor, on the ground, lose your house, lose your children, like you could lose it all, and they would just be like, I don't know what happened. Like literally.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not kidding. Like they can just look right at you and be like, okay. Or they're very often, and I've heard couples, I've seen couples that they'll say, we'll fix this. There's no we.
Right.
In a narcissistic relationship, it's the, and I'm going to use woman. The woman is the I, and there is no we. It's he, and she is left holding the bag, so to speak. And that's much more common than the other way around. So, but there is no we. So I will often giggle in my head, if I, not out loud, but I have a head bubble moment in my office where when someone, I know a couple is struggling with this, and I'm thinking of one right now that every time he's like, well, we'll figure it out. And I'll always say to him, like, well, what are you going to do to figure it out? And he goes, well, we'll figure it out. I'm like, you mean Sheila's going to figure it out?
Yeah.
And he doesn't like it when I say that, because he knows
Right.
I'm right. He knows I'm right. He's not we. There's no we. He doesn't come up. He's the guy that says, I'm going to take you away. I'm going to pay for this. No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't do that. He's not going to plan anything. He's not going to take care of the kids. Nope, he's not. He's going to restrict. He's going to do his own thing. And then he's also going to begrudge you. He's going to say, you do your own thing. And that's another piece of this is people often think of people as being controlling in narcissism. And the control that you see in pop psychology is often like, where are you going wearing that and all that? That's, and you can't spend that money. That's not the type of control that typical insidious narcissism is. It's this very covert, malignant thing that's like, well, you go on vacations, you do all these things. What's the big deal if I go do this? It's like you want the person, they'll say, yep, I want you to go do those things, but then I'm going to put you down for doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
That is control.
That gives me leverage.
That's the leverage point of like, well, you went away on a vacation, or you went over there with your girlfriend, or you went out to dinner and I worked. Yeah. Okay. So it's like, and then but I don't mind that you do that. Then why are you saying that at the same time? Like that's the control. And a narcissist will tell you, that's not control. I don't ever tell you what to do or where to go or how you can dress. Or that's a narcissist will say that. I can't tell you over 30 years of doing this how many times I've heard a narcissistic person say, I don't tell them what they can do. No, you just have comments about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You have controlling comments about the fact that
you heard it. You don't command. You heard.
Right. You're right. You put out these bombs that are just like, well, I think it's great and I applaud you for doing it. Now I'm going to take it away from you. I'm going to give it and take it away to make you feel really bad. And if you're a person that gets easily guilted, which I'm not, then you'll feel guilty and you'll be like, and you'll curtail your behavior, which is how people get stuck in abusive relationships, is if they feel guilty, they'll start feeling bad. Because that's, you can, but you're going to get stuck further. So that's one thing about that. Right. Oh, there's so many things and we're going to run out of time. Okay. So that's the setup for like the narcissist. I have more to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about the narcissistic traits next week. I'm going to talk about like that control thing. I'm going to talk about commitment issues. I'm going to talk about the pathological lying that comes with it. I'm going to talk about love bombing more, the grandiosity, attention seeking, how people are dismissive and abusive, and then what to do about it. So it might be a 3-part series because I didn't even get to everything today.
Nice. Yeah.
But I'm going to talk about all those things because I think it's really important for people to see what it looks like and not to fall into what it is on the surface of what gets purported out in the world by people just talking about it.
There's a lot of misunderstanding.
Because there's so much misunderstanding and it's really much more insidious. And when I say that, it's much deeper and much more malignant than that surface, like, I don't want you wearing that skirt. No, that's not the control. It's that other control. It's the like, oh, I want you to go away on vacation, have fun. And then turning around on you and going like, well, you got to go on vacation and I didn't.
Yeah.
That is control. That is a narcissistic pull back the curtain and go, I'm going to get you. And that's what you have to know.
It's often more covert.
Yeah, very much. And that's why I make the difference. Women are much more overt with their narcissism. men are not. And there is differentiation in that. And I can differentiate that a little bit too, but there is that. And I'm going to look up the middle child thing. So
I think you're right, though. It might be less, actually.
What?
There might be less narcissism among middle children than oldest and youngest.
Yeah, because they learn to fight for their own stuff, and they figure it out on their own because they find their own supply that's good.
Yeah, they find not to care.
Right.
They figure out not to care.
Right. Exactly.
And
they're not given enough. They're not given enough attention to want to care.
Right.
They do care, but they don't.
Yep.
Like it's like they come to a balance. Like I have a middle child right now in my life that we talk about this all the time, and she's learning just not to care about it more. She's a older teenager at this point, but she's like, and she's doing great, because she's like, I care, but I don't, because it's never going to change. She's already come to the point where she's realized over the years of even talking to me, like acceptance. I care, but I don't, because she or he doesn't care about me. So I'm just not, and they don't. Yep. It's like, on some level. So anyway, okay. So we have big show coming next week again, and then probably a third coming into the lovely month of November. All right, you guys have a great week, and I will see you back here on Wednesday.